This conference will now be recorded.
All right, we've gone through the call to order, Pledge of Allegiance, public comment, of which there was none, welcome and introductions. We're now at the election of the chair and the vice chair. I'll open it up for any nominations.
I will nominate John Reed. This is Terry Flanagan.
You're nominating John Reed for
Chairman.
All right. Do we have any other nominations for chairman? All right, we have any nominations for vice chair? I'd like to nominate Terry Flanagan for vice chair.
Brilliant.
It's a good thing.
Do we have any objections to either of those nominations? All right, let's call for a vote let's just make this simple. Are there any objections to John Reed as chairman or Terry Flanagan as vice chairman? Hearing none by acclamation, let's make it official. All right, approval of the minutes for September 8th. Do we have any comments on the minutes? All right, do we have a motion to approve? Would anybody like to have a few more minutes to read the minutes?
Mr. Chair, I'll move to approve the minutes. This is Terry.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second the point.
It's been moved and seconded that the September 8th minutes be approved. Let's call for the votes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any objections? So moved. Okay, we'll move to the compliance audits for the Madera County Transportation Authority, the 2021 compliance audit. And we should have you should have in your packet an enclosure. Troy, do you want to chime in on this?
Yep, I'll take this and then I'll turn it over. Good evening, Troy McNeil, Deputy Director, Fiscal Supervisor for the Transportation Commission. So each year we have 4 audits that are completed as part of the Measure T program. One for the Transportation Authority itself, and then we have 3 compliance audits for the 3 local jurisdictions. Typically at this meeting, we would have a presentation and a review by this committee of all 4 audits. And then after such, you would then issue an annual report. Unfortunately, due to circumstances outside of our control, not all of the audits, the compliance audits, are completed. However, we made a decision still to move forward to still have this meeting, and there's still plenty of information to cover. And so further in the agenda, we'll talk about an upcoming meeting here shortly to finish the compliance audits review, and also to discuss the committee's annual report, which are tied to those. And so today, the biggest one audit is the audit for the authority. So with us today is our independent auditor, Fausto from Price Paging Company, and the senior manager on the project, Kristen Torres. So I will turn it over to them to present their audit reports, and feel free to ask any questions of them or myself of the report. Fausto, did you want me to run that presentation for you from my end?
Yeah, I think that would be great because I'm not familiar with this this software. We use Zoom and Teams and some others, so I don't see where I can share it. If that would be okay.
Give me 1 second.
Just so I'm clear, while he's doing that, Mr. Foster, what were the circumstances beyond your control that prevented the audits from being completed?
We're speaking about the compliance audits for the cities and the county?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, we had staffing issues, just in terms of the number of people that we have available to perform the work. I can't specifically cite COVID, although we continue to have people in and out as a result of that. And so the volume of work really that we had was not sustainable. We've added some new staff. We have cut relationships with certain clients to begin to focus on fewer clients. And so we are taking some actions to do that. At this point, we expect to continue to work with the authority, but we have made decisions in other places to, again, to sever certain client relationships. Just the volume of work, the number of people that we have available to do that. And I think if you speak with other CPA firms, there is a current shortage in the profession of qualified people to be able to handle the volume of work that we have available. It seems to me that probably not only our profession, but you can see it out there in several other business areas. So that's been our challenge.
Fausto, this is Troy. My understanding as well is some of the entities were later in issuing their reports as well, their jurisdiction reports, which then prevented Price Paging Company to start those compliance audits. So that's my understanding. That was a factor as well.
Yeah, I think in any year that can be a factor, and then yeah, thank you for sharing that. That is also a factor. However, I think we may have been able to push more aggressively on any of those had we had more resources internally. So, Kristen, who's the audit supervisor here, she did everything that she could on her end, and we've just had some staffing issues and some departures that also hurt us in the last 6 months.
Thank you.
Yes. So is the presentation, oh, there, yeah, I see it there. So our agenda today is I want to be brief and be respectful of your time. So we'll talk about audit process, a few key areas of emphasis, the auditor's reports that were issued, and the required communications, which are those communications that the American Institute of CPAs requires that we communicate with you. And finally, time for the discussion or questions. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So with respect to audit process, just very quickly here, engagement team, we've been introduced. So I'm the engagement partner. Kristen is our audit supervisor. And we also have a gentleman, Miguel, who is audit staff on this engagement. We did have some other personnel again that changed during the course of the audit, which didn't help, but these are the people that remain. We can go to the next slide, please. So audit process, we're required as auditors to assess the risk of error and the risk of fraud. In order to do that, we obtain an understanding of your internal control processes, but not only internal controls, we also are required to obtain an understanding of your financial and other operations. In order to assess risks, we're asking questions about what can go wrong. With respect to internal controls, we ask two questions. Are the controls effectively designed, and are they placed in operation? When I say we ask those questions, we're not simply asking those questions of your management and or of your board or other personnel. We're asking ourselves those questions. So we're obtaining documentation through observation, through inspection, through other analytical procedures, and then we're answering those questions. Are the controls effectively designed? If so, are they placed in operation? If so, then are they mitigating the risks of error and fraud? Again, everything that we're doing in the audit process is about identifying errors and/or fraud. Now, we're focused on materiality, so we're focused on material errors or fraud, not on immaterial items. In the case of fraud, if we identify anything, even if it's immaterial, we would be required to report that to you. So based on our risk assessment, we then develop audit procedures to obtain evidence about the financial statement balances and about the transactions to determine whether anything that could have gone wrong that would be significant to the financial statements did go wrong. So once we obtain that audit evidence, that gives us a basis for issuing the audit opinion. We can go to the next slide, Troy. Thanks. So a few areas of audit emphasis. So these are a few key areas. Doesn't mean that we don't look in other areas, but these are the areas where we focused because we thought there would be a greater balances, not only greater balances, but also maybe more significant risks. So we're focused on revenues that the organization receives. Receivable balances. The Governmental Accounting Standards Board has some very specific rules about how revenues and receivables are reported. And so we focus in those areas. We also focused on expenses. Where did the organization spend the money? Where is the documentation in support of how the money was spent? And also were those expenses recorded properly in the financial statements? Related party activities is always a factor and a focus, and the American Institute of CPAs continues to highlight related party activities as an area that auditors should be focused in. GASB 84, GASB stands for the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. So they issued a new standard that required the reporting of fiduciary activity a bit different than it had been reported in the past. And so we focused on that. Finally, the financial statements, as you know, are not only the balance sheet, income statement, but also include the financial statement disclosures, the footnotes that are included. And so we focus on those disclosures to make sure that they are properly reflected in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. If we can go to the next slide, please. So the auditor's report on the financial statement. The audit report, or the audit, was performed in accordance with both AICPA and government auditing standards. Financial statements, our opinion says, were fairly presented in all material respects. So you received an unmodified or a clean opinion. It's the best type of opinion that the authority can receive. There were no significant, or rather the accounting policies were consistently applied, and all the disclosures are included and reflect the financial activity of their organization in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. We've included just a table here on the government-wide basis. The financial statements of the organization are actually, you have two sets of financial statements. They're included in one bound set, but they are actually financial statements that are prepared on two different bases of accounting. And so sometimes people that are not sophisticated about governmental financial statements might be confused. And in some cases, I think probably these two sets of statements create more questions. Nevertheless, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board wants two sets of books. So this table that you're looking at is on what we call the full accrual basis, which includes all liabilities, all capital assets, if there were any, of the organization. So assets were, as you can see, $12.6 million. Current liabilities of $2 million. Long-term liabilities, which are on the government-wide basis, but will not see them in the fund financial statements, of $7.9 million. So a net position, 2.5 net position
Fausto, I don't know whether it's just me or whether it's
is
system-wide, but I'm having a lot of trouble with you breaking up quite a bit.
net worth, right? So if you take your
Also, we can't hear you.
minus your liabilities, you would
Fausto?
arrive at that net position number. Revenues
Fausto?
on this base of accounting were 6.6 million, that were expenses. So you have a change of $40,000 as would be expected for your. I'm going to turn off my camera and see if that helps. Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
I can hear that, yes. Fausto, and I know we've asked this question before,
Hello?
and I apologize. I apologize for
Hello?
forgetting the answer.
Am I back?
Hello, can you?
Okay.
Are we communicating? Fausto, can you hear me? Can anybody hear me?
Yeah, I can
Yes,
hear
I
you.
can, but I think maybe his connection is
Yes.
not very good.
Mr. Reed?
Okay. Yes. Yeah. My question, and I apologize because I know this has been asked before. Can you explain the difference between restricted and unrestricted on the net position?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, so net position, okay. Net position on the government-wide financial statements is segregated in different ways. So unrestricted net position is theoretically available for any purpose, any general purpose of the government. Restricted net position is the difference between the assets and liabilities that has a purpose restriction by an external party. So I don't know if that helps, but the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, again, wants a segregation between the net position, which again, net position is the difference between the assets and liabilities, and the Governmental Accounting Standards Board wants it to be reported in a fashion where if the assets, the net assets, the net position is restricted for a purpose, then it would be reported as restricted. So it generally it means more, for example, in a multi-purpose government where they have various special revenue sources, grants and other things that are restricted for specific purposes, and then they might have a general fund where it is unrestricted. But the same theory applies to your organization. If you have funds that, for example, can be used only for capital road construction, then those would be reflected as restricted. Any other funds that can be used for general purposes would be reflected as unrestricted.
All right. So the unrestricted are shown as a negative in the net position. You've got your restricted assets, which equal your non-current assets, which I assume that's money that's set aside for actual projects.
Correct.
But your unrestricted assets are then shown as a negative position against that number. And I'm just from an accounting purpose standpoint, I don't understand why they're a negative.
Mr. Chair, this is Troy. I believe that has to do with our long-term bond debt. So on there, it will capture all of the liabilities for the bond debt, even though we pay it as we go, as we collect the revenues, we would pay it. And so I believe that's why it's showing negative. And Kristen or Fausto can correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, you're correct, Troy. And I'm trying to open up the financial statement on my side so I can refer all of us to the same page that I think the chairman's referring to. But looks like I'm having some computer difficulty. But you're exactly right, Troy, that the long-term debt, the bonds of what, $8 million are not are reflected on the government-wide statement, but not in the fund statements. So it seems like I'm opening up to that page.
I'm going to make a suggestion
Did that help?
to everybody. If your connection continues to be this poor and we have to have another meeting anyway, then perhaps we ought to put off this financial report until that meeting where we have all of the numbers and all of the reports together and either have a better connection or can do it in person, because this is pretty poor right now. The community, at least my ability to hear what's going on.
I don't know if you can hear me now, but Kristen is on the line with me and she's very capable to continue this part of it, but we're glad to defer it as well.
Well, that what you just said came through very clear. I don't know. Is everybody else having the same issue?
Right, now, it's good now, but it was a problem a minute ago.
Agreed.
Okay. Well, if we can continue and it stays good, then let's do that. But if it starts falling off again, if we're going to have another hearing anyway, let's just do it then.
Sure. Kristen, can you continue on the PowerPoint just to make sure that?
Yes, yeah. And the restricted net position, it is related to the restricted cash in the bank accounts for the long term, for the bonds.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. So on this screen, we have the government-wide, and he said that the net position is the difference of the assets and the liabilities. And it also shows the revenues and expenses for the year to show a net income for $40,000. Again, this is government-wide, it's full accrual, and it only captures your general and your capital fund. This next slide is the second set of books that Fausto was mentioning earlier. These are the governmental funds. So this is not full accrual, this is modified accrual. So what it does, and this is the part I think where Fausto was cutting out a little bit, government-wide includes long-term items such as long-term debt, which was included in the government-wide slide. The governmental funds do not include long-term items. So on this slide, the long-term liabilities will not be shown here. So you have the general fund, which is just for the MCTA, it's the sales tax portion that's applied for MCTA for the planning. So the general fund is expected to be around zero, which is 95, so it's pretty close to zero. I call it zero. And then it should have a running balance of zero or around there. And the difference is due to timing issues, the timing differences, I should say. And then you have your capital projects fund. So the capital projects fund are for capital projects, is the fund that captures the activity for the capital projects that are occurring. So this slide shows the assets and the liabilities. Majority of the assets comprise of the cash and AR. And then you have your fund balance, which is an accumulation over time. As of 6/30/2021, that's the fund balance for each fund. And then you have the revenues and expenses. So the revenues for the capital is 6.5 million, which is the percentage of the sales tax that gets allocated for capital projects. And then the expenses are the expenses incurred for those capital projects that are occurring. So the reason why there's more expenses than revenue is just because there was more capital project expenditures, more capital projects happening during the year than the actual revenue coming in. However, you can see fund balance is high in the capital projects fund. So the money is being covered by prior year money. So we could go to the next slide.
When you say it's a partial accrual or it's a modified accrual, so when what part is modified? Are they, when you book a project, are the total expenses expensed at that time, or are they, or how does that work? In other words,
Yes.
if
So
you incur a liability, you incur the entire liability up front as far as the
yeah,
bookkeeping?
yes. So expenses are recorded when the expenses are incurred. The difference is in the revenue. So in the revenue, there's this term called available revenue. So revenue could only be counted as revenue if it was collected within the availability period after year end. So whatever the set availability period is for the entity, some is 60, you'll see some 90, 180 days after year end. If it was collected within that time frame, then it could be counted as revenue. If not, then there is a line item on the governmental balance sheet that's called unavailable revenue, and that is revenue that would have been recorded as revenue, except it wasn't collected within that availability period, so it was classified as a deferred inflow. So that's one scenario. And then the other scenario is the long-term debt that's not included in governmental accounting and in the governmental fund financial statements.
Okay, just so I'm clear, that you said the expenses are booked when they are, when they occur, or are they booked when you assign them to a project? When you,
They're booked when they occur.
okay, so until you get the bill, you don't record the expense.
Right. Yeah. But
Okay,
normally, so even if the entity receives the bill subsequent to year end, so your year end is June, and if the entity receives the bill in July or August, for example, they look at the bill detail, and if that invoice was for services or for construction that was performed prior to June 30, they actually accrue it back. So then it still would be counted as an expense. It would be recorded as an expense for the financial statements.
okay,
So it's based off of when the expenses were incurred and the date range within the invoice received from vendors.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome. The next report is the Government Auditing Standards Report. On this report, it talks about internal control and compliance. And we do not do an audit of internal control, but we do have to disclose if there was any internal control deficiencies that we identified. And we're pleased to report that there were none. And also for compliance, if we found any compliance that must be reported, then it also goes on this report. But this is a clean report. There were no instances of either a non-control deficiency or of non-compliance. And we could go to the next slide. And then it covers the required communication that we communicate with the board or with the oversight committee. So the significant accounting policies, if there was any changes, like Fausto mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, GASB 84 was implemented and effective for fiscal year 2021. So this is only pertaining to fiduciary activity. There were no significant estimates within the financial statements, no sensitive disclosures. We didn't encounter any difficulties in performing the audit with management. They were very cooperative, and we really appreciate Troy and Patricia and the entire team there. There was no significant audit adjustments to report. And again, no disagreements with management, and there were no fraud or illegal acts that were identified.
Good.
And if you guys, so now we could leave it open to any questions that you guys may have.
This is Terry Flanagan. I have a question. Could you summarize in a nutshell, if it's possible, the GASB 84?
Yes, so the GASB 84, previously there was different types of GASB 84 agency and an investment trust fund. They revamped the fiduciary statements. the MCTA financial statements did not get affected as much as a city or a county would have, because they already accounted for, they already had certain line items on their financial statements where it showed a breakdown of the balance sheet and then the income statement. I'm trying to go to the financial statements on my side. So if you're looking at a paper copy, the fiduciary statements start on page 18. And on this, if you look at a 2020 financial statement, you'll see that it's very comparable for MCTA. The only difference was the header that we needed to change and then some line item language terminology. So the actual implementation of GASB 84 did not have a significant impact on how things are broken up. There was no prior period adjustment for it. There was no significant changes within the actual financial statement.
So would it be just fair to say is a governmental regulation? Is that what it is, GASB 84?
It is, so GASB oversees, they issue pronouncements, and whenever they issue a new pronouncement, any governmental agency that is under GAS, Government Auditing Standards, has to follow any pronouncement that they release that is applicable to that entity. So if they release a pronouncement and that entity has that type of activity, then that entity must switch over to whatever that pronouncement is, and they must implement it, unless, of course, auditors and financial statements are all based on materiality, right? So if they send out or they release a new pronouncement and it's very insignificant to the entity and you're talking very trivial amounts, then the entity might decide not to switch and implement the new pronouncement, but then they have to show their auditor that it is not significant to their entity and it's not worth switching over and implementing.
Okay.
Hopefully that gives some background. Oh, okay.
I have one thing that makes it difficult for me anyway to really, especially seeing this once or twice a year, to get a handle on our finances is the revenues are current. The revenues show you could get a current revenue picture, which in this case it looks like in between 2020 and 2021 we went up almost 1.3 million in additional revenues. But the expenses are based on projects that have begun or booked in prior years and are just now coming due. If you're booking expenses at the time you get the actual bill, more on a cash basis like that, then it's difficult to say to really judge what you have to work with from the way the financial statements are being presented to me anyway. In other words, you have expenses that show up from a project that was booked 2 years ago, but all of a sudden we get to 2021 and we have an additional 1.3 million in income. Well, we're not really able to say, here's how we're going to utilize that, because bingo, additional expenses from the prior years are showing up now, and those are just getting booked. So I guess I'm just kind of talking out loud with the difficulty I'm having an understanding of the best way to be able to project what our available assets are going to be going forward.
And I think Troy might want to take over, but when you have capital projects, you enter into agreements with contractors and they give you an estimation of what the contract or what the project will entail and the costs.
Yeah, thanks, Kristen. So, Mr. Chair, I think one of the things we can look at is in the annual work program that we release every year. It's usually approved by our board in September. It has the programming of all of the funds, meaning this is what we're planning on these are the projects we're planning on doing on a regional basis. And that's something I want to point out too, is this audit and these funds that you're looking at now is for MCTA, the administrative side, which is in the general fund, but also the capital projects fund, which is for the regional projects. The majority or a good chunk of about half the funds are then passed through to the local entities. we don't really capture capital projects activity on these particular financial statements. And that's what is covered in the other 3 financial statement, the compliance audits that are not ready today. Each entity capital expenditures are captured in those. So the ones that we're seeing today are for our capital projects. And in a minute here, when you get a local agency update and the regional program update, we're going to be talking about a few projects that have been completed or are currently in construction. And that is one of the reasons why we have a huge amount of expenditures now showing up. And so if you want to go back to the annual work program, and the latest one is for 21-22 is the draft one is, or sorry, the 21-22 is on our website, and the draft 22-23 is on, I believe is on the website. If not, it will be shortly. That you could see what regional projects are programmed through the end of the measure, which is in 5 years. So over the next few years, we know what projects we are planning to do.
Well, but I think you're missing my point here, Troy. My point is that those projects have been based on prior projections of what our income would be. Now we've had this big jump in income that, almost a 20% jump. Well, actually a little bit more, about 20% jump in income. And I don't know whether that's carried through into 2022 or not, but it's not reflected in our bottom line yet because of its. So I guess what I'm saying is that looking forward on future projections or on future projects that we might be able to look at, that this jump in income it's just a little hard for us to say, hey, we've got this extra money, because on our financial statements it doesn't show. It does show.
Right. You're right. So I do have a cash flow model that I'd be happy to sit down and run through with you to show where the available funds, because I do forecast. I take what actual receipts are and then we forecast. So yeah, there was a big jump. And so now I've included that in our forecasting to show what may be available. And there's the potential to maybe enhance a project that's currently on the list or add a new project. And that's something that we're currently looking at. We haven't necessarily, it's still in the preliminary phases, so we haven't necessarily talked a whole lot about it yet. But because these increased revenues are fairly new. And so we're trying to figure out, is it sustainable, number one, because we had a lot of COVID stimulus spending and change in behavior in spending. Are we going to have a recession? Is it going to stop? So yes, I do include it in my forecasting on the cash flow model. We're just trying to be cautious and conservative. Is it sustainable? Are we really going to realize that additional revenue over the next 5 years to the end of the measure? So I think that answers your question. No, it's not captured on the financial statements, but I do have a cash flow model that it is captured in.
And is that cash flow model something we're going to see tonight, or is that something you would have to maybe for the next meeting?
I'd be happy to talk about it at the next meeting if you'd like me to, but we're not prepared today.
All right. I think that, I don't know what the other committee members think, but I think that might be, from an oversight standpoint, that could be a very valuable part of the information that we would need to provide any proper oversight.
Sure, I'd be happy to.
I'm looking for input from the other committee members if they would also. I don't want to be the only one that wants it. So.
We're looking to spend money to give us a clearer picture of what's available.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, great.
Okay. Yeah, we can put on the agenda for next time and have a discussion about our forecasting, our cash flow model, and maybe I can reach with you how much you want me to go into the nuts and bolts, because it's complicated and it's a huge spreadsheet. And so I want to make sure that I bring the information that you're wanting to see.
Thank you. So back to you, Kristen.
Are there any other questions?
None here?
Yeah.
Hearing none, sounds like that's it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you guys all for your time.
All righty then. So Troy, did you want to talk about this meeting for the missing reports now?
I'll defer to Sandy. I think it's on later on the agenda when we talk about next meeting.
Oh, okay. That's fine. So then that brings us to our local agency updates. We want to start with the city of Chowchilla.
Hello, good evening. This is Jason Rogers, City of Chowchilla. How you doing today?
Well, thanks.
All right, I think Sandy has my presentation.
I'm pulling it up right now,
Oh,
Jason.
sorry, I didn't know he's running.
Give me 1 second.
And it's a fairly short one. We don't have as many projects as some of the other agencies do. All right, let's go ahead to the next page.
Huge delay.
So this is just a overall overview of our roads. We have 62.9 miles of roads. Current PCI is about 65. This was done a few years ago, and we are planning on doing a re-inspection of our roads this upcoming fiscal year. And we'll see if that condition changes. We do expect it to probably decrease a bit, just because we don't have the amount of funding that's needed. These were the current year 2021-2022 allocations.
Jason, if I could interrupt for a second, could you give us the brief explanation of the PCI again for everybody's benefit?
Yes, that's a pavement condition index. That's a number to determine how good the street is. Closer to 100, the better the street is. Lower to 0, that's worse. 65 is kind of in the average and falling range. As you can see, we've got probably about 5 categories that we classify our streets as. And we go out, do visual inspections, sometimes other inspections to determine the condition of the pavement out there. And then it's assigned a number based upon various categories. We use
And
yes.
what was it last year?
We don't do this every year. We try to do it about every 3 years
Okay.
to do this, because it takes a while to go through and catalog them and go from there. So we try to do it on a 3 to 5 year average and update that as needed. So we're coming up, like I said, in our next fiscal year of needing to go out there and reassess our roads again. And we have an outside firm that does that for us, an engineering firm, and they're able to go through with different types of technology and train staff that are able to make those assessments, put them into a computer program, and then it kicks out the numbers for us. And then I know we're about a week out of, or a few days out of ending this current fiscal year. These were, but since we hadn't had a meeting in a while, these were our allocations for 21-22. A total of $465,000 coming into us for a Measure T. We have, as you can see, there's about, you have the street maintenance program, supplemental street maintenance program. That's primarily going around fixing potholes, other issues, minor issues. Our rehab reconstruct maintenance program, we try to build those funds up over years in order to put that into larger projects. And then flex funds are impounded by MCTC for regional projects. And then we do have ADA compliance funds and transit funds that we try to use for various projects as well. Because of our smaller amounts, generally we have to build up over a few years, a couple of years or more, in order to do larger scale projects. Next slide.
All right, takes a second, Jason.
No problem. So projects that were completed, that's wrong year. But we did the Road 16 reconstruction project. And that was completed from 5th Street down to State Route 152. And we did that in partnership with Madera County. Because part of that road is within the county. And so we were able to use some of our funds to be able to do that. Total project cost was $532,000. We used half of it was funded through Measure T, another half through gas tax. And then, of course, then we, like I discussed, we use other funding for pothole general maintenance of our streets from there. So for upcoming or current and upcoming projects, right now, we, as of last week, just started the Humboldt storm drainage and road rehabilitation project. It says design, that shouldn't be design. Sorry about that. We're using about 80,000 of Measure T funds for that project. And we're very happy to move along forward with that. That is a large stretch of road reconstruction plus storm drain installation and complete streets, which include putting sidewalks where some aren't existing and ADA ramps where they aren't existing. And that stretches from 3rd Street all the way down to 15th. It's a heavily traveled road that goes in front of our high school and something that's been needed to be done for quite a while. We're also using Measure T Transit Enhancement Program funds of $25,000 towards the purchase of a bus that was supposed to be purchased in this current fiscal year. However, due to shortages and supply chain issues, we haven't received that bus yet, so that'll be in the next fiscal year. We are also currently working on design and environmental for reconstruction of Chowchilla Boulevard from Avenue 24 to Avenue 24 and a half. And construction's estimated in summer of 2023. That'll be our big project for the next fiscal year. And then the State Route 99 233 interchange project, or the roundabout project. The environmental is now being completed by Caltrans, and they estimate that environmental completion will be in July 2023, and estimate construction date dependent on funding in 2025. And then additionally, we'll continue to use Measure T for general street maintenance and repair, as seen in that picture right there. And then next page. And yeah, so like I said, we're planning on, like I said, short and sweet, and we're planning on using those Measure T funds in conjunction with gas tax, CMAQ, LTF, in order to address cities' transportation needs. One of the areas that we're looking to partner Measure T funds with is with the roundabouts project. We've already met with Caltrans, or not Caltrans staff, CTC, California Transportation Commission staff, to discuss local partnership program on potentially marrying some of those funds together to do the full build out of the roundabouts project in 2025. And so we're working with Caltrans to continue to complete that environmental, so that way we can apply for funding in 2024 and then potentially use that as a one-to-one match with LPP funds in order to get the full build out of the roundabouts project. And with that, that's my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions?
I'm here.
I have just one, and this is a general question that I might ask everyone. Do you have any, is your long-term planning take into account the possibility that Measure T will not be renewed? And do you prioritize things differently because of that possibility?
We haven't, although I don't have any Measure T programmed out longer than 3 years currently. And so we do 5-year capital improvement plans, and we identify potential projects. And in our future years, I do have it as that we need to identify funding. But I think we're kind of hoping that the Measure T renewal passes in November.
All right, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
That moves us to City of Madera.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ellen Bitter. I'm the Deputy City Engineer for the City of Madera, and I'm happy to share how we're using the Measure T funds and what our program is. And Troy, are you queuing up our presentation?
Yes, bring it up right now.
Great. Okay, is this in presentation mode?
There's a delay, so hold on a second.
Okay.
Let me try that again.
While this is loading, I will talk briefly about the City of Madera's pavement condition index figures. There is not a slide on it, so I might as well just verbally discuss it. Our survey was completed a little further out than Chowchilla's. We did ours in 2016, and we surveyed the collectors and arterial streets only, because we have a lot more road miles in Madera. I would say about half of our streets rank in the good and very good range, but that also means conversely about half of our streets are falling into the fair and poor category. Our average of our collector and arterial streets PCI rating was 68.6. So I did want to note that we are planning to undertake a new survey for not only the collector and arterial streets, but also all of our local streets as well. So perhaps next time we are together, we'll have new figures of our PCI ratings to demonstrate how our investments have fared. We've used a lot of Measure T funding for maintenance strategies, and see how they're holding up. Okay. just to capture what's on the slide, and it's pretty generic statement, but we use our funds in support of all of the programs that are outlined in the annual work program that we submit to the authority. And also, very importantly, we use the Measure T funds as matching funds or to leverage other grants from either the state or the federal level. So you might see a small amount of Measure T going to a project, but it is for big return using the grant dollars. The recent projects that are nearing completion or that we did complete this past year, I'll discuss next. We completed several maintenance projects, which is a combination of overlays and chip seals and other strategies. There's a process called Reclamite, which is a very light oil rejuvenating agent that's sprayed on the streets. And so we might apply that on newer streets, and it just keeps them at a higher, better condition and without them deteriorating where they need more treatment. So this last project, and if you can see the map, we did 3 streets with this in R71 using the LPP is gas tax. It's from the proposition, Prop 1B gas tax, and it's the local partnership program. And so only counties that have adopted sales tax measures are eligible for these funds, and you have to match it 1-to-1 with your sales tax dollars. So that's why you see here the Measure T and the LPP funds are very close to matching. We don't have the completion date on there, but that was finished last spring and accepted by council. Next slide. This project is close to wrapping up. It was primarily the other pot of gas tax funds. The local road funds are called RMRA, and that was the majority of the funding for this project. And as you can see, we had we completed 14, or actually more than 14, I see 16 areas of pavement maintenance and rehabilitation with this project. Next slide. R79 is about to go out to bid. And again, this is the current year's allocation of the RMRA funds, and we've partnered it with Measure T funds so that we are able to address more miles of streets with the larger funding to achieve better economies of scale. And again, it's a variety of treatments, some overlays, some chip seals. You'll see crack filling ahead of the overlays. You'll see maybe some dig out patches of failed areas before the overlays, but this is another big project about to go out. The next slide. We have just completed some sidewalk installations. This particular one, R84, is in the vicinity of the James Madison Elementary School, which is near Olive and Stadium, near Madera High School. It's infill on the roads that the parents and children would use to walk to the campuses. And so the funding on this project was CDBG, Community Development Block Grant. Actually, it had a much higher share than shown here. And then we contribute local funds to fully fund the project. There's another one I don't have a slide for that is near the Martin Luther King Middle School and Virginia Lee Rose Elementary. It's over on the east side of town on Lily and Vineyard. And it's a sidewalk infill project. Next slide, please. So this year, keep going, one more slide. So we're looking at continuing our our dedication of the street maintenance and supplemental street maintenance funds, we are expecting about 1.5 million, and that goes directly to our streets department for their program. So they do their program even outside of the projects that I listed here for their pothole patching, crack filling, and other. They do their own contracted services for certain maintenance treatments on the streets. And then there's a small share, the 0.5%, that usually we partner with some of the other projects to help either with ramp reconstructions or some of the sidewalk infill. Next slide. This is a slide and a project that has been on the books for quite a while. You might be familiar with it. It's our biggest project right now on the books. It's for the widening of Olive Avenue from Gateway Drive to Knox. It also includes the widening and new signals at the railroad crossing. And that at this point is kind of where we've stalled a bit on this project in completing our agreement with the railroad for their portion of the project. They have to approve our designs and then agree that we can move forward with the project, and then we enter into an agreement, and they will actually do their work with the new crossing panels and the new gate arms. But we have to still get to that point. There has been portions of the project completed. We are almost done with the undergrounding of the overhead utilities. We have one small piece of PG&E conduit that needs to go in actually for the railroad traffic signal. It provides the power for that, those gate arms. And when that is complete, hopefully it'll be done in July, then PG&E can finish the conversion of their facilities, and the poles will be removed, and they'll be out of the way then for the widening project. So that's what's currently under construction there. We hope to have agreement with the railroad this next fiscal year, such that we can be advertising maybe by summer of 2023 for this project. Next slide. This slide is next year's major chip seal, pavement maintenance and overlay project that is put out from the engineering department. And we partner with, again, the gas tax, the RMRA portion. And for a large project, the streets that are here shown in color are the ones that have currently been identified. I do expect that given the funding, we'll be able to add more streets to it, but we haven't fully identified those yet. They'll probably go out to bid next spring. And the next slide. It's a similar project. There are a few funding sources here. We mentioned the LPP, the Local Partnership Program. There's another source of funds that came from COVID relief funds. The acronym is CRISA. And so we have pledged those funds to this project as well. And it'll be a similar big maintenance and overlay project. I do want to add that when we do these projects, we upgrade the ramps that are currently not in compliance, and also when we can provide certain features to enhance the streets, we try to do that as well. Next slide. We have a new traffic signal planned for D and South Street. It's funded mostly with the congestion mitigation and air quality funds, but we're matching it with Measure T funds. This is it's a safety project, but it did meet warrants due to the pedestrians that use the area, and also as far as the air quality enhancement, it's currently a 4-way stop. So vehicle emissions should be reduced when that's converted to a traffic signal. Next slide. some of the projects that we're working on that will then utilize the Measure T funds for construction in future years. There's a missing piece of Almond Avenue between Pine and Stadium, and we will be using Measure T funds for that project. And also we're planning a traffic study of the corridors of Almond Avenue, Stadium Road, Pine Streets area. We've got the 2 high schools, we've got a elementary school, and then some new subdivisions in development going in. So we want to do a large scale study to make sure we're properly planning for our future improvements there. And we'll be using Measure T funds for that study. Next slide. Currently, the transit enhancement funds, we are letting that pot build. Our transit department is in the middle of kind of an overhaul of our transit system, and they've been doing a study, and they're planning program changes that they expect to roll out next year. So they've reevaluated the routes and the stops and trying to provide a more efficient system that will attract the ridership. So we expect several projects to come out of that activity in the next couple of years. Next slide. The 2% portion of the share that goes towards environmental enhancement projects, we use those for matching our CMAQ funds. We have some alley paving projects planned, and also a couple of sidewalk projects, one on Schnorr Street, and one around Washington School. Again, those are all matching other grant funds. Next slide. Which I think brings us to the end, so I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I have one.
So let me ask, oh, go ahead.
I was just curious if you could tell us how many miles of road the city of Madera has?
We have, I quick looked this up before the meeting. We had 72 miles of collector and arterial, and that came out of our pavement study that we did in 2016. And we have more local roads than arterials and collectors combined. So we're close to 200 miles in the city. We need to update that. We have accepted some new subdivisions, and so and also there've been a few annexations. So we need to recalculate our lane miles, but I'd say roughly around 200.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Since it's been 6 years since your last index study, do you have one scheduled?
We are planning to put out a request for proposals to bring a firm in to study all of the city streets, because we need to update our collectors and arterials, and we need to get our local streets surveyed as well, and that will help generate 5 years worth of projects from those surveys.
And then just the same question that I asked Jason, are you making any contingency plans, or are you changing any or putting anything in your long-term planning in the eventuality that Measure T is not approved, not renewed?
So we do not have a contingency plan. I think we are under the assumption that there will be a renewed measure. The regional transportation plan accounts for an ongoing measure, and so we're kind of following in their footsteps and assuming it's going to be in place. With the gas tax funds that have recently provided a revenue source, that would help us to some degree. Obviously, our major projects would have to drop off, and we'd rely more heavily on grants for major safety improvements and other corridor enhancements.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any further questions? All right, thank you very much, Ellen.
Thank you.
All right, County of Madera.
Good evening, everyone. This is Jared, Madera County Deputy Public Works Director. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
I'm going to go ahead and get into the presentation, but I probably am going to turn my camera off just to avoid any potential technical difficulties. So, and I'm, yeah, if I could share from my computer, I can run it from here, Troy, if that's okay.
Yeah, let me make you the presenter.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
All right.
Are you able to share?
Let's see. Yep. How's that look? Can you see that okay?
Looks good.
All right. Okay, so this is a presentation for the meeting this evening, and probably hear a lot of the same stuff that you've heard from the other agencies, but I am going to go through a few of our significant projects that we've completed. So just to kind of overview on the projects, from the county regional project perspective, we have 3 primary projects that we've been working on that are actually all in construction at this point. Avenue 26 and Road 29, the Road 200 Phase 3, the bridge replacement, and then also Avenue 7 rehabilitation west of 99 here in the valley. And then, as you've heard the other agencies report, we have our general maintenance that we continue to do, utilize our supplemental road maintenance funds from Measure T to assist in the day-to-day patching and drainage work of our county crews. And then we also have for the county, our supplemental maintenance we are special districts funds that are in Measure T are utilized in many of our road maintenance districts to assist with maintenance in those districts. All those districts are essentially self-funded through assessments, and what we've done in our practice is to basically try to match those funds that the district has with Measure T to help do projects in those areas. So as I mentioned, the Avenue 26 Road 29 rehabilitation project, that one has been in the works for a long time, and I'm very happy to report that that is well under construction at this point. That is a good example of the leveraging of Measure T funds with other dollars. You can see there that about 88, almost 90% of the project is funded with federal land access program funds. And so, it's a good bang for our buck in terms of how much, we're getting out of that project. So that project is underway. As I mentioned, the project is fully overseen by federal highways. That's the way that the plat program works. So the county doesn't have a whole lot of involvement with the actual administration of the construction. However, we are, kept up to date on the progress of the project. And so I have a couple of photos here of the project and the progress out there. And what we're utilizing or what's being utilized out there is what's kind of known as the full depth reclamation process, where they pulverize the existing road and reuse that material as opposed to removing it and hauling it away and bringing other material. So you can see there the pulverizer goes through and pulverize, then they grade and compact it there on the lower right. And then in this case, they are bringing a little additional base rock material in to help reinforce that. Most all of the roads in the county, especially out in the rural areas, are not built to current standards, so they don't have base material underneath them. So in some cases, to get the proper traffic index rating and bring it to standard, we do have to add that base rock material. But again, pulverizing the material that's in place and reusing that allows us to have to, limit the amount of extra material or base rock we have to bring in, because that helps go into the sub base factor. So here's a little bit of the paving that's happening. So once they pulverize and reshape, then they come behind and place the pavement. So you can see nice long straight road out there, which I'm sure is going to be great for folks to test their speedometers and things like that, unfortunately. So the next project is Road 200 Phase 3, we call it, the bridge. This is essentially the final phase of the Road 200 project that was originally adopted in Measure A. And this includes the the replacement and the realigning of the what is known as the Crooked Bridge out there. And this one is fully funded by Measure T. And what we've done is we've combined the county's regional Measure T with MCTC Measure T regional funds as well to fully fund this project and get it into construction. So again, this one is under construction. If you drive through those areas, you probably run into our traffic control that's happening right now. And that's estimated to be completed somewhere early next year, first quarter of next year, barring any unforeseen conditions that we might run into. So here's a couple pictures of the project underway. You can see, we've got a one-way traffic control through the construction zone. It's controlled by temporary traffic signals, letting one lane through at a time. Because they're working, directly next to that embankment there, excavating out to widen. So this is just kind of the widening of the embankment for the alignment to go straight across. Here's some excavation of the abutments, the future bridge abutments. Contractors having all kinds of fun with rock excavation out there, which is something that we encountered on both other phases of the project. Fortunately, I don't think we're going to have to do, well, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, we're probably not going to have to do any blasting in this portion of it. We did on the first two phases, but it looks like for the most part, they're able to get that excavated with the hammers there on the excavator. So there's the abutment 1 footing being formed up and getting ready for placement of steel rebar to get that formed up. And I think they're planning to pour this abutment on Friday, if I heard correctly today. So things are moving along out there, but probably start seeing some real noticeable stuff here in a couple months when they get above a little more above grade and you start seeing deck and things like that put into place. So the other project is the Avenue 7 rehabilitation. So this is a 2-mile segment just west of 99, basically coming from 99 to Road 30 and a half. It is funded there, you can see, by Measure T, our county regional funds, and then also as I think City of Madera had mentioned, the local partnership program funds through SB1. There's about $660,000 that the county had a portion for that we applied to this project. That one has been bid and that contract is under construction. However, they have not started this particular segment. It's actually part of a larger contract that includes, I believe, about 8 miles total of road rehab throughout the county areas. So the contractor is working. They've started that contract, but they have not started on this particular segment at this point. And I would point out that this essentially will complete the full rehab of Avenue 7 from 99 all the way to State Route 145. We previously did that 6-mile segment from 145 coming east to Road 30 and a half as part of our previous SB1 projects. So this will kind of finish that off and make that route from 99 to 145 completely rehabbed. Then I did want to touch on this project. It's actually a Measure T regional project, but the county did, complete this project, known as the Oakers Midtown Connector, the official name of the road, River Parkway Road. For those who live in the mountain area, probably well aware that we've finished this and it is now open to the public and we've gotten quite a few comments and calls from folks about how much this helps with the circulation up there in the Oakhurst area. Particularly, we had a call from the school principal who was very thankful that this was now open and operational and creating, a secondary route out of that area. So project came out very nice. There were some challenges for sure, but overall, it did come out very well. I think, going to serve the community for a long time. And again, this one was another example of our Measure T dollars being able to leverage other money, the SB1 funds, through the competitive local partnership program portion of SB1. So a good project. There's a picture of the ribbon cutting back in February. Lots of excited people. You can see Mr. Troy McNeil on the far left there, posing nicely for the camera.
So are you there?
And then it was kind of cool. We had a little parade of our emergency services, along with some of the local car club, going across the bridge for the very first time, which was kind of cool to see. So yeah, overall that project turned out great. And like I said, the community has really, I think, taken a liking to that, and being able to have that secondary route out of the school road corridor. And we've got, I'll just say that, even with being able to have that route now as part of another way to get in and out of that area with the Road 426 rehab work that's about to start here in the next couple of weeks. This is, again, just a good example of how this project is going to help serve the community. So this is a kind of a dashboard snapshot of our current pavement condition indexes. You can see that on the left there, kind of a graph of the progression, or I guess decline of our pavement condition index. So it has gone down since so the 76 was, just for clarification, that was an estimated pavement condition index prior to us having the pavement management system in place. In 2018 is when we completed our full evaluation of our network, which is a little over 1,500 miles of roadway that the county maintains. That does not include all the maintenance districts or non-county maintained roads. So overall, I think we have a little over 2,200 miles if you count those. But yeah, you can see there. So we started at 44 in 2018. We're currently sitting at about a 35, which is down, just 1 point from 2021. So while it is, continuing to fall, I would say that the rate of decline is a little less than what it was in the previous years. And I would attribute a lot of that to the fact that we do have Measure T, that we can put some maintenance funds towards programs and projects, and including some of the projects that you just saw. As far as the functional classifications, you can see their arterials are at about a PCI of 46. That's actually up 1 point from last year. On the collectors, we're at a 38. That's actually up 3 points. However, on the locals, we're down a point. And then, like I said, overall, we're down one point on our overall PCI, which, that essentially tracks with what our focus is. The board has taken a position to focus, on arterials and collectors. Those are the largest roads that serve the most population. And so the idea and the kind of the position or the policy the board's adopted is to try to focus on those and get those into a good condition to where we can then move to a preventative maintenance program on those roads, and then start to focus more on the local and collector roads, hitting those a little harder and heavier. So So that's kind of a snapshot of our PCI and our conditions at this point. Much like the other agencies, we are looking to go out and do another update on an evaluation, and have our network analyzed and collect that data again. As I mentioned, 2018 was the last time it's done, so we're coming up on about 4 or 5 years now, which is about the time we need to do. And we're trying to, what we're hoping to do is kind of evaluate what the best approach is. In some cases, it doesn't make a lot of sense to go out and survey like local roads, because we know that we haven't done a lot of work on those, and most likely that PCI has not gone up from what it is now. So we may not include that in this next survey, just to try to save some costs and focus on the ones that we are prioritizing, and then circle back and look at those again. So just a quick plug for our Matco Services app. If people don't know about it, it's very handy. Best way to get issues to the county in terms of road maintenance, pothole patching, just about anything. There's quite a bit of issues that you can now submit through that app. So very handy. And with that, I'm available for any questions.
Questions?
Yeah, Jared, it's Terry Flanagan. Can you explain briefly how the maintenance districts qualify for Measure T funds? What is the process involved, and how are those prioritized?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, our kind of policy in terms of maintenance districts and using Measure T is we generally look at what a maintenance district has available in their funds that they've accumulated through their assessments, and in some cases that can take quite a few years depending on what the assessment is, and how large the district is. I mean, we have some districts that are made up of maybe 5 parcels on one road, and with an assessment of maybe $100 a year. So you can imagine that doesn't accumulate all that fast. But what we try to do is look at what's available. In some cases, maintenance districts have either homeowner associations, or they've got some sort of formalized group. And typically, if they reach out to the county and express interest in doing something with their road, or their mile or two or whatever it is of their roads, then through our maintenance operations Phil Toller, we'll discuss and go over options and what might be available as far as treatments on that. But again, it kind of depends on honestly, we have some maintenance districts who actually don't want maintenance done. They'll accumulate funds, but primarily save it for just things like snow removal in the wintertime, and just very light maintenance type stuff, and our brushing, those sorts of things. So it kind of just varies by district. I don't know that there's any specific like qualifier that I would say. I think it's more about, what does the district have that they can bring to contribute to it, and then how can we look at what can be done with that funding.
Okay. Thanks, Jared.
Well, just to clarify that, generally Measure T funds you don't usually use Measure T funds on individual districts, do you?
Well, so we have some districts who have accumulated funds, or in some sense we actually have some districts who have decided to increase their assessment to accumulate funds at a more rapid pace, and then with the understanding that we can match that with Measure T. So we do use, I would say we do use Measure T out of the maintenance district fund portion of Measure T. So there's a carved out sub program for maintenance districts, specifically in Measure T. That was actually added or included in the Measure T plan back when Supervisor Gilbert was in office, to essentially make that funding in the program available more specifically for the mountain areas, because that is primarily where all of our road maintenance districts are, is in the mountain areas for the most part.
Oh, I didn't remember that. All right, thank you. Oh, Jared, just the same question I asked the others. Are you making any contingency plans for in the event Measure T is not extended?
Well, I mean, in terms of contingency plan, I mean, I think the biggest thing for us is, we're gonna program and continue to program our funds, through the end of this measure, to the extent possible. I think, and we're probably going to get into this here in a minute on the agenda, but the Measure T renewal and that implementation plan and program looks a lot different in terms of the funding categories and programs in there. I'm hopeful, just like everybody else is, that it does get passed. I think the biggest thing that we would probably lose, from a county perspective is, well, a couple things. One, obviously the ability to leverage funds, as you saw on some of those projects I was presenting. We were able to make a lot of progress, and you do some pretty large projects for pretty minimal cost. And not having those funds from Measure T to match to that means that we have to either find them in other locations, which goes really from our road maintenance fund, our gas tax money. And then obviously, the street maintenance and the contribution that we get to just the maintenance. So, I guess I would say, I don't know that we can say that we have a good contingency plan. We're going to have to see what happens when that time comes. But, I think with all the things we've seen in the preliminary, information on Measure T and the renewal, is that we're hopeful that it is going to pass. I think folks really want to see it happen. So.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Jared.
My pleasure.
That brings us to our regional update.
Yes. That would be me. Let me change the camera really quick. Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the interest of time, because I want to talk about the renewal here in a second, make sure we have time to do that. But most of the projects that have been completed or in progress have already been brought up. The Oakhurst Midtown Connector project, or the River Parkway Road, great project. We're very happy about how it turned out, and that it's really a benefit to the community. And that is because of Measure T, and because we were able to leverage some additional funds from the local partnership program to be able to enhance that project. We're excited about that. Two projects that were mentioned that are in progress that are Measure C regional projects are the Road 200 Bridge. Jared covered that. Great project. We're excited about that one. Then also an upcoming project is the State Route 233 interchange operational improvement project. That is hopefully will be in construction in 2025. We're working with Caltrans to get the environmental completed, and so that we can move forward with, they're looking at putting in some roundabouts and then hopefully widening the bridge. And we're going to be going after a local partnership program grant in order to do it all at the same time. If we don't get the grant, we can't find another funding, we might have to come back and do the bridge at a later date. But we're optimistic and we're hopeful that we can do it all at once. Some other future Measure T regional projects are the Cleveland Avenue widening project in the city of Madera and the Gateway Avenue widening project. Those will be starting soon. and we'll be looking at construction 2026, 2027 approximately for those projects. So stay tuned. We'll have more information on those as those projects get underway. So those are the remaining projects on the list. There is one other one I wanted to mention that is we're classifying as a Measure T project is the State Route 99 widening from Avenue 7 to Avenue 12. There we were able to leverage a bunch of state money to do that. We have very little Measure T money that we were able to put out about $9,000 to be able to get $80 million for the project. And so we're excited about our partnership with Caltrans and the state in order to do that. And I think that's slated and scheduled for construction in 2026 as well. So they're going to be doing the bridge, the Cottonwood Creek Bridge, which is right under the underpass there, Avenue 12 interchange. They're going to be replacing that here within the next year or so. And then the Avenue 7 to 12 widening will be 2026. So that's the plan. We're claiming that as a Measure T project, and we're so excited about that. I am available to take any questions about any of the regional program projects.
No questions.
All right, it's easy.
Okay, so that brings us to the renewal update.
Yes. Give me 1 second and I will pull that up here. One second. Share first. 1 second, Chairman. I'm pulling it up on the screen.
Okay.
Very good. I want to run this through really quickly. There's going to be a presentation at each of the local jurisdictions regarding Measure T renewal, and I'm not sure why it's 1 second. There we go. Okay. Sorry, Mr. Chair. And we wanted to cover what happened with the how the investment plan came together. And Mr. Chair, you were on our steering committee, and so feel free at any time to chime in of your thoughts on the process and what happened there and what have you. But we had 13 meetings with the steering committee from different organizations representing various sectors within our communities, from agricultural to our local jurisdictions, to transit, to ADA, to health and labor and goods movement, from our community-based organizations, education, seniors. We tried to include different perspectives on a committee to bring their opinions and their thoughts to make sure we're addressing everyone's needs. And so here we go. Some of the responsibilities of the committee were to review various documents, to review other organizations and measure plans that have been recently passed, to make sure that we're capturing kind of the latest and greatest information available for transportation planning and for projects. We try to solicit input from all of the steering committee members through interviews. All of the meetings were available to the public. We had various public comment at these meetings. All of the meetings were recorded and available on our website. If you want to go back and view any of the meetings, they're available there to view. And I'm sure it's very exhilarating viewing time. Some of the guiding principles that helped us to form the investment plan primarily were to look at repair and maintenance of our street and roads. In August of 2021, an opinion poll was conducted from the potential voters in our county, and by far the number one issue that was raised was fixing our roads and pothole repair, maintenance, etc. There's also some other transportation modes, transit, active transportation projects like our biking and walking. There's also an emphasis or an importance on trying to improve our air and our air quality through reducing greenhouse gas emissions. It's also important to realize that technology is improving every day. There's new opportunities to use technology for transportation purposes. So we wanted to make sure that we used all of that information in helping guide an investment plan. And so just some highlights of the new plan. The duration that they looked at and was approved by our board was until ended by voters. We've had a measure since 1990, Measure A, and then we had Measure T that was passed in 2006. So we have history of having a transportation sales tax measure in our county for transportation purposes. In my opinion, as a finance guy, it's been very helpful because of leveraging. We've been able to bring in millions of dollars from federal and state sources because of Measure T, which has only helped enhance the number of projects we've been able to do and the kind of projects. Some of the highlights is to try to be consistent with the voter polls that were conducted. So the investment plan is out for public review. It was released, I think last week. And so feel free to review that. And if you have any comments, feel free to issue or submit those comments, along with the plan or implementing guidelines that go into more detail of how some of the plan and programs would be implemented. And so some of the public engagement strategies, like I said, we had 13 steering committee meetings, 2 opinion polls. We did various stakeholder presentations. We did a community-wide survey. We did a community-wide mailer, and some of you might have remember that, receiving that in the mail of a Measure T. It probably had this logo on it, that you had an opportunity to go online or to fill out a card and mail back in to give your input on where a renewal could focus on. We also tied it into our regional transportation plan and sustainable community workshops that we had, because they go hand in hand. The regional transportation plan is our major planning document that we do for the county. We actually released the 2022 draft plan today. It is available on our website for public comment. Our board is scheduled to adopt those on August 31st. There will be a public hearing on July 20th for the plan, the EIR that accompanies that plan, and the Federal Transportation Improvement Program. That's a programming document for kind of short range projects. We're all released today and available. So Measure T ties into all that, because Measure T is just one source of funding for our projects. And that is why I mentioned it. So anyways, we did our best to engage the public the best we could with resources we had to get the input from the public. Just real quick, we did this was the second opinion poll that was conducted in April. They had over 500 people voters that they interviewed, either through email, text, or phone. Some of them were done in Spanish as well as English. Margin error is about 4%. And this is the initial ballot language that we're contemplating. This is still being reviewed, but it's to keep local streets, highways, infrastructure in good repair, fix potholes, improve highway safety, 911 vehicle access and safe routes to schools, reduce traffic congestion, complete other transportation projects, and qualify for $600 million in state and federal matching funds. Shall an ordinance be adopted to continue Madera County's voter-approved asset sales tax without increasing the tax rate, providing approximately $20 million annually. And so here's in the poll, they asked about half until end by voters, or half for 30 years. And you'll show on the next slide that the numbers were about even on that, meaning there was no really difference between ended by voters and a 30-year measure. And so with citizens oversight, independent audits, and all money staying local. So the citizens oversight is this committee, is the Citizens Oversight Committee. We do independent audits and all the money stays local. That is a draft ballot language that is being considered to put on the ballot. Like I mentioned here, there was really no difference between intel ended by voters and duration. 76% versus 77% for probably yes or definitely yes vote by in the polling. So importance of the issues, the very most important thing was improving the maintenance of local streets and roads versus local economy, public safety, infrastructure, homelessness, preventing local tax increases, protecting the environment, and reducing traffic congestion. The number one by far was improving the maintenance of local streets and roads. I think we all know and all understand that live here in the county that we need to continue investing in our streets and roads, that there's definitely opportunity for improvement there. And so they tested different projects and services, and the number one, again, to pave and maintain local streets and roads was the number one choice in the polling. And these are all kind of the top tier: fixed potholes, various projects on different locations on state highways, add passing lanes, retrofit, replace older bridges and overpasses, etc. So I think we heard loud and clear, let's fix our roads. And seeing these are some other tier two that in the polling. Scored well, but still not as high as those other ones. So again, our greatest remaining need by far, if you talk to anyone in the county, is we need to focus on maintaining and fixing the roads. The PCI index that we just heard about, that hopefully will improve, and that's part of the goals or performance measures of the renewal, is to track that progress of our PCI. Are we really making improvement in that with Measure T investments? For planning purposes, we do have to look, even if it's until ended by voters, we do have to look at a kind of a projection over a period of time. So we chose 30 years. We're projecting approximately 866 million in Measure T sales tax over a 30-year period. And so some of the questions came up in our steering committee is, well, if we do an until ended by voters, how do we know we got it right in the plan and in our allocations? And so we wrote in the plan and the implementing guidelines that at a minimum, we would revisit the plan every 15 years to address changes in new technologies or our needs, or maybe we didn't get something right. We could look at that sooner if needed, as needed. We would have a full public engagement process in that, and we would have plenty of opportunity for public comment and input if we were to amend the plan at any time. But at least every 15 years, we'll revisit the plan and update it as needed. Why until ended by voters? Well, the polling says that the voters potentially support that there is a huge need for fixing our roads. We've already been doing it, having a tax for now 30 years. It'll be 35 years at the end of the measure. Why don't we keep on paying this tax? We're used to paying it. We need to invest in our roads. And if we keep investing in roads, it'll pay huge dividends now and in the future for our economy, but also just the cost to maintain the roads is cheaper if we can get on top of it and improve our PCI. The need for better roads cuts across all geographic areas, all economic spectrums, and all ethnicities. Doesn't matter who you talk to in our county. When we talk about transportation, the very first thing they say is we need to fix our roads. Some say we do need to enhance our transit, but by far the number one thing that all people say, we need to fix our roads. I know I've said that many times, and I'm going to keep saying it. It's really the message of this renewal. Some of the things we looked at, like I said, was the regional transportation plan. We looked at the PCI index for needs and other funding sources and gaps that we had. Where can Measure T help leverage or fill some of those gaps in delivering projects? So when we looked at allocation, well, how do we allocate the money that we'll get to the different type of projects? We We wanted to make sure we had a local choice and control. We had flexibility as much as possible. We want to make sure we have a significant investment in fixing our roads, fix it first, and make sure that all neighborhoods are addressed and that we have equity and safety addressed. So this is the allocation by program in the plan. The largest allocation in this blue here goes to the local and neighborhood street maintenance and pothole repair program at 35%. In the next slide, I'll show a comparison to our current measure and how that relates. But just for the renewal, there's a local street and road program at 15%. There's a flexibility program at 12.5% that the local jurisdictions can decide on any type of transportation project of where their needs are. They know their needs and they'll determine where that money can be spent. The major routes, access, and safety improvements will be what we now call our regional program, our regional projects. And so we have some money there for various projects. I'll show that list here in a second. That is primarily to help us to leverage other state and federal funds for our major highways, our state highways, our arterials, our collectors, our interchanges, things of that nature. We have public transit at 4%. Our current measure is 2%, so it was doubled to enhance that. We also have something that was in our current program. Our current program has environmental enhancement, which can be used for any type of air quality project. So in our renewal, we wanted to make sure we have a commitment to pedestrian and bike safety and bike lanes and bicycle facilities. And so that's at 4%. And then also some 3% for clean air and new technologies to help improve our air quality, to look at electrical vehicle infrastructure, for example, and other type of technology needs that are really on our horizon, that are right before us. So we want to make sure that we have money that the jurisdictions can spend for those type of projects. So just here's a kind of comparison. The colors kind of match up for similar type of programs. So if you can see from this blue here, that's the maintenance. And so we, in the new measure, increased the allocation by 60% to make sure we have a commitment to try and fix our roads or improve our PCI index. So that was a big change in the renewal plan in there. The yellow is the regional program that went from 26% to 25%, so pretty similar. Those are the big, large, major projects. This next slide is just the basic numbers on a 30-year projection, and based upon current population estimates, which change over time. This is approximately what each jurisdiction could plan on and forecast on that if renewed, that they could receive in these different programs. On this next slide is the list of potential projects for their major routes or our regional projects. When we were looking at this, because we committed to look at the plan at a 15-year cycle to make any changes, we wanted to make sure that, okay, any regional project that we can look at potentially delivering in 15 years should be on our list. And that's what we tried to do. So we have the bridge project for 233 in case we can't get other grant funding for that. We have a Cleveland Avenue project for a planning study for if you live here in Madera or drive here in Madera over on Cleveland and the railroad that passes through there, that's a very unsafe and congested intersection. So the state wants to do a planning study to see how we can do a grade separation or improve that intersection. The city also wants to look at improving Ella Street. There's the new high school and other schools, facilities over there, and they want to improve that area. They have money for improve the bridge on Gateway Drive, to improve the connection on Road 28 or Tozer Road, Avenue 14 to Clinton. On Westbury, to put in a Westbury Bridge over the Fresno River, or the Driver Fresno River, put in to help with the circulation there. Intersection capacity improvements on Yosemite and Tozer. The county is looking at trying to improve Avenue 12 to widen and make it more safe. adding some lanes throughout that whole section. And then within the ranchos to look at some traffic calming or complete street projects because it'll be difficult to widen in town area. And then up in the mountains area, there's a commitment to look at some mountain area evacuation routes and to do a planning study and provide money to do projects up there to improve the safety and evacuation in case of a fire, for example. How can we improve our evacuation routes? And then there's money in case we need it for the next section of 99 that needs to be widened after the 712, which I mentioned, is the Avenue 17 to 21 for the preliminary phases. The state of California is looking at spending most of their money and their priorities on bicycle and pedestrian and rail type projects. And so it's getting very difficult to widen state highways. And so we want to make sure that we have a commitment locally to get that project moving along and shelf ready, because that's the most difficult money to get from the state. Usually if we can get shelf ready, they're willing to come to the table and help us construct it. And so we have some money in there in case we need it to get the environmental design right away completed. Again, the goal is to achieve 70 in our PCI. Again, that's the goal, and we're going to measure progress towards that goal countywide throughout this measure. And then we will potentially look at bonding and borrowing as necessary to accelerate any delivery of projects or repairs to potentially save money. As we know, we're in a high, right now is a high time of inflation. Costs keep going up like every day, seems like. And so some of these projects, the earlier we can get them delivered, we can get them done cheaper. Why 2022? So why go this year? One, we're showing that the polling is incredibly high. There's potential voter support for that. If we can go now, there's potential of potentially bonding to get projects started sooner and saving money. The next 2024 is a presidential election. The presidential election sometimes can be divisive and controversial, and so we try to stay out of that when we put these measures forward. And then again, the polling all shows we want our roads fixed. We want them fixed now. And so continuing a measure, Mr. Chair, you asked that question from every agency. What's your contingency plan? And I think all three of them says, well, our plan is that it gets renewed essentially. And it's important, I think, that we have that from a planning perspective so that we can fix our roads and continue to fix our roads. And so why not go now? So here's the next steps, and this is where maybe we could use your help. The city of Madera is planning on hearing this investment plan on July 6th, the city of Chowchilla on July 12th, and the county of Madera as well on July 12th. And the actions that they're going to take is to approve the plan and implementing guidelines. And so we're an invitation that we could have to our steering committee and to members of the Citizens Oversight Committee is to potentially attend these meetings and to voice, hopefully, your support of continuing the measure from your perspective and how these funds, in your opinion, has helped to improve our communities and that can continue to help our roads and our transportation systems. On July 12th, our Board of Supervisors, we're asking them to also to continue to designate MCTC, or the Transportation Commission, to continue serving as the Transportation Authority. And that's currently how it's set up now, and we're going to ask them to continue that designation. So the authority doesn't have its own staff. Essentially, the MCTC staff is the authority staff. On July 20th, our board will meet, or the authority board will meet, MCTC and MCTA, to approve the ordinance, to approve a resolution requesting the Board of Supervisors to call for a special election and to place it on the ballot and to approve the ballot language, as well as approving the plan and implementing guidelines. Like I mentioned, it is out for public comment and review. And we invite you to share the opportunity through social media or through your friends, the opportunity to review that. And if they have comment, please submit the comment. At the July 26th Board of Supervisors meeting, it is planned that they would approve by resolution to call for this special election and that it be held on the November election, 8th election, and approve the ballot. So this will be the official action, July 26th, from the Board of Supervisors to place it on the ballot. So once they make that action, we will move forward to file everything with the elections office to get it on the ballot. And then that one is when the real work begins. From our side, we will embark on a public education campaign to talk with any of community groups, civic groups, service groups, community-based organizations, anyone that is interested. We are willing to go and talk to them to educate them about Measure T, the current measure, but also potential renewal. And then there is a planned separate campaign that would also run a campaign in support of, I would assume, a support of the measure. And that's the hope. Our side from staff, we will support the education side of it. So if you are involved in any groups or organizations, whether it be up in the mountains, foothills, in Chowchilla, or down here in City of Madera, or other areas of the county, we would be happy to come and present and answer questions. And then just the conclusion, just again, we want to continue addressing our street and road maintenance needs. We want to be able to have money for leveraging state and federal dollars. We view Measure T as a success, and we hope that we can have continued success in helping improve our transportation system. Mr. Chair, that concludes my presentation on the renewal, and I can answer any questions.
Questions from the committee?
Yeah, it's Terry. I've never seen that language until, well, let me preface that. I strongly support renewal of Measure T, emphatically. But I've never seen the language until removed by the voters or whatever it was. What's the process for that?
Yeah, I'll go to there.
Terry, that, by the way, was quite a long, almost contentious part of our committee meetings of coming to that place of a lot of us felt that, having a 20-year or a 30-year expiration would be a lot more palatable to the voters, and others felt the opposite. And so they did this poll and came up with this 76 versus 77% difference. The process really is in my opinion, and this is one of the reasons that I supported a termination date. In my opinion, the process is so onerous that it's never going to happen. But it involves bringing a new election, a voter-sponsored new election to change it or to terminate it. And that's a very, very difficult thing to do.
Yeah, I would agree, John. Yeah.
Yeah, essentially it would be an initiative process. Even with a termination date of 20 or 30 years, voters could still do that initiation process to end it early. And so the process is similar in any termination date or no termination until ended by voters process. What this hopefully will do is to help from a planning perspective, but also potentially bonding and helping to deliver projects sooner rather than later to save money and to get more.
There's no question about it, Troy, that it's a better way to go to have the non-expiration date. I fully agree with that. The only issue with it is its palatability to the voters. And
You're right.
That I think is going to be an issue.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be super critical from a public education campaign from our side is to lay out those issues of like, what does it mean to not tell anybody, or just like you asked, and to answer those questions, what is the process? But also explain that within the plan, we do have a mechanism to at least every 15 years to look at the plan and to look at, do we need to make changes? And so there's still an opportunity for the public to change the plan if we didn't get it right. And if they want to end the tax, there'd be a initiative process to do that. And so anyways, hopefully that Are any other questions about that? Hopefully that answered your question.
That did answer my question. Thank you.
My concern with the situation right now is that I don't think, I think time is getting really short to prepare an adequate campaign. And I think that that's something that's it's going to have to be. I mean, you talked about the outreach, and that's great. Going to the service clubs and all of that is very important. And I think that the information prepared by the committee is wonderful. I think they've done a great job. I really do. The trouble is that at least half, maybe more than half of the voters are never going to see it, and probably are not members of the service clubs that you're going to go see, and they're
Yeah.
going to their whole involvement with the Measure T renewal is going to be what they see on the ballot. So I like the wording that's there, pretty much most of the wording that's there on the actual ballot measure itself. I think that is probably going to be our most important thing. And then the other thing is really getting the word out there that this is going to create jobs. And the third thing is in the mountain area, I think and I said this in the meeting, we need to identify specific projects, not say we look at, regional evacuation routes and every place else in the county, you're very specifically identifying projects, certain roads. We're going to do this. The mountain area, you're not. And most of you, probably about at least 30 to 40% of your voters, some elections higher, over 50% of your voters are out of the mountain area. And so I think that that's a mistake. I think that we should be identifying specific projects. I can look at, we're going to fix this curve. We're going to fix that, section of road. Then that means something to me. To say we're going to study and decide what we're going to do means you're going to spend it in the valley, even though it's allocated in the mountain.
And that's a good comment and good feedback. And I think there are some designated in the plan, the Oakhurst plan, and Jared can chime in if he wants, that there are some designated evacuation routes out of the area. And I believe that the plan is to look at those designated evacuation routes and how we can improve them to make them better and more safe and enhance them and widen them or whatever needs to be done to improve those designated evacuation routes. Jared, am I correct on that?
Yeah, Troy. So you're right. There was an evaluation that was done several years back that identified some key routes that would be, routes of interest in terms of evacuation. It also evaluated various, we'll call them pockets of the communities up there that were ranked kind of as far as, fire safety or threat. And then I would just say that, the project that is in the regional program for the renewal, it talks about construction of identified access routes, but it also talks about planning too. So, some of the funds will be used to look closer at that to determine, if there are routes that are more viable or, what might make more sense potentially, and so, we've heard, the county has definitely heard from the folks in that community in that area that, the fire risk is by far one of the highest concerns. I mean, obviously the improvement and maintaining of the roads is certainly important too, but looking at the fire risk issues up there with folks facing pretty large insurance costs up there that are jumping like crazy right now. Some folks are even having trouble getting insurance altogether. So, that's kind of why the idea was to put it in there. And I get what you're saying, John. It's not maybe super specific, but at the same time, I think that generality will help us to give us a little bit of flexibility to look at something and nail down what that specific route might be.
I agree with you, Jared. I agree with you completely as far as actual implementation. You're exactly right, and I fully trust that you guys are going to do the right thing. It's just that there's a general distrust of government in the electorate and in the voting population out there, that if it's not specific, a lot of people are going to say, well, I don't see anything that's going to help me. you know,
Right.
and that's going to cost you a certain percentage of votes. And I think that even though that study said 70-something% support it right now, we need to get 66%, and that's hard to do. And we could all remember, Measure L from a few years ago. It went down in the flames. So I just think anyway, I don't want to belabor it. We're going too long about this, but that's my.
No,
Can I make
you're right.
one comment?
Yeah, go ahead.
John, I think you're absolutely right. I think voters do tend to say, what's in it for me? And I can tell you, living in a very rural area, that it's those local roads, not the connectors or the arterials. It's local roads that people are most unhappy about. And I'm really happy to see that there's an increased percentage in the new measure, if it passes, to go to local roads. But Jared had also mentioned that the county tends to prioritize arterials and connectors. And I hope that's not going to be an issue.
Good point. Mr. Chair, I just want to add, our executive director is listening in, and she put some comments in the chat that as far as ending the measure, the authority board also has the right to end it at any time as well, if they choose to do so. So that is something available to them, because they're the ones that will impose the tax, the ordinance, if it's approved by voters, that they could remove it at any time if they so choose. So that's one way also to end the measure. And also, she posted something about, we are limited on the ballot language to only so many words. And so it's hard to put specific projects on the ballot per se. And so we try to be general and specific at the same time. We're limited to 75 words on the ballot. So I think your comments are valid, and I think it's going to be behoove all of us to get out to those people and groups and neighbors to answer questions and talk to them about the potential projects that could happen and provide input on how this measure could benefit them. Because that you're right, that is the focus is, how does it fix my road, or how does it fix me getting to work, or whatever it may be, to get to work safer, or to get to school quicker with my kids, or whatever it may be. So how can we address those questions? I think is really critical. I think we already have some planned engagements for some folks up there, some foundations and some groups up there already. And we're looking forward to talking to, like I said, anyone that wants to know more and ask questions. We would be happy to do that at any time.
Okay, well, in the ballot language, I certainly wasn't suggesting you put specific projects on the ballot language. The ballot language ought to be probably even shortened up a little bit to basically saying, we're going to fix your roads and we're going to make jobs. We're going to create jobs and we're going to fix your roads. That's basically what it ought to say, and but anyway, that's neither here nor there. All right, that's my feeling. Let's move on to our proposed meeting schedule.
Do you have another question? Wayne, did you?
I had a question. He answered that, the 66%.
Oh, yeah.
That one.
Yeah. 66.67% is what we need.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to address the proposed meeting schedule. Our next meeting we are proposing is the second Wednesday in August, which would be August 10th at 5 p.m. And at that meeting, we would be approving, we'd be reviewing the remaining agency compliance audits. And so Price Page would be with us again. And also you have requested that the cash flow model be presented by Troy regarding the forecasting of Measure T dollars. And the annual report to voters regarding the audits.
I don't have my calendar in front of me right now, and I think it sounds fine to me. I don't know what the rest of the committee feels like, but maybe we could send out an email and confirm that date.
Absolutely.
Does anybody have a problem with that date that they know of?
Okay for me.
Good for me.
Good for me.
Okay. let's make it the tentative date then, and then just send out an email to confirm.
Okay, thank you.
And that should be a shorter meeting than today, just FYI.
Yeah, much shorter.
All right, do we have anything from the committee members? All right,
Well,
motion to,
I'd like to welcome the two new members. Welcome aboard. And
I apologize for that.
eventually the committee get to, filled up I think there's 2 more vacancies. Is there a process in place to recruit or?
There is, and we are in the process of it.
Good.
It's difficult.
Yeah, okay. That's all. Thank you.
And I apologize for not welcoming the 2 new members also. And by the way, from the 2 new members, do you have copies of the original Measure T and what its intentions were, and if you don't, would you like that?
I do. I looked it up online.
Okay. All right. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion. Carrie.
All right. So moved. We are adjourned.